Thank you everyone who's joined us today. We're so excited to see y'all here and interested in learning a little bit more about city agriculture planning. Just really excited to think about who might be the next applicant for the region's next plan focused on local food and agriculture. First, I did just want to note that we are recording this session. We want this to be a resource for folks to be able to use throughout the application process, so we are going to post it to our website. So with that in mind, we're going to go through about 15 to 20 minutes of slides just up front, and then we'll open it up to any questions that y'all might have at the end. So hold on to those. If anything comes up for you throughout the presentation, or if you're worried about forgetting them, feel free to drop those in the chat and we will circle back. So I wanted to start with some introductions. I'm Sarah Brown. I'm the Senior Policy and Planning Manager with Foodwell Alliance. I've been with Foodwell since 2018 and kind of managing the City Agriculture Plan initiative from the Foodwell Alliance side. This is a program that we run in partnership with the Atlanta Regional Commission as well. And so we've got our senior planner and another Foodwell colleague. I wanted to pass it over to y'all to introduce yourselves too.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. I am the Policy and Planning Coordinator with Foodwell Alliance. So I support Sarah at Foodwell in the work that we do on our side, as well as our planner over at the ARC, and I can pass it to her to introduce herself.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Allen, and I'm a senior planner at the Atlanta Regional Commission. And we partner with Foodwell and have been working on our current plan now for the last 8 or 9 months. So looking forward to talking about the planning initiatives, and thank you for being here today.
Great. So if questions come up for y'all, again, feel free to throw those in the chat, and all three of us will be available to answer at the end. So if you have questions from the ARC perspective, from Foodwell side, open to discussing any part of the process. And before we dive in, I do just want to do 2 quick poll questions just to get a sense of kind of who's in the room with us today and what your top priorities are around local food systems planning. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll. This is just asking, what stakeholder group you most identify with as you're coming to this process. I know a lot of us who do this work and follow it can probably identify as more than one of these stakeholder groups, but just pick the one that best fits you today. Okay. Wait one more second here. Okay, so we've got some city officials. Thank you so much for joining us. Your role is really integral in the city agriculture planning process. A farmer, thank you for your service. We love our growers. One educator, a parent, and a city resident. That's great. All of these different stakeholder groups are really important in the planning process, the community engagement phase, and so we love to see kind of a breadth of representation here. So thank you all so much for sharing your time with us. And I've got one more question I want to launch before we dive in. And these are around your top priorities for local food system planning. So what would you really like to see focused on if your city were to apply and develop a city agriculture plan? I know all of these would be ideal, but just try to select your top 3 just so we can see what's rising to the top for folks. About 10 more seconds. Okay, so we really see creating and expanding growing spaces like community gardens and orchards as a top priority. as well as additional points of sale, more local food in restaurants and retail, educational resources, increasing connections, composting. Yep. These are all kind of buckets of recommendations that could be included in a potential city agriculture plan. Everyone is going to look different and will be tailored to the needs of your particular city and based upon resident feedback that we hear in a community engagement phase. So it's great to see kind of a breadth of options here and what y'all are thinking about as you come into this conversation today. So thank you so much for sharing that. Feel free to keep those in mind. If you have any specific questions about any of these categories and what they can look like in practice, we can talk about that too. So I assume if you guys are here today and you registered for this webinar, you're a little bit familiar with the concept of city agriculture planning, but I just wanted to kind of ground us all in a shared understanding here. A city agriculture plan is like other city level plans that might be focused on things like housing or transportation or parks. It really is a set of short-term and long-term recommendations for a city to achieve its vision of building a strong local food system over the next 5 to 10 years. And we know that supporting and growing a local food system is really rooted in the strength of the relationships in that system. So we incorporate an intentional community engagement piece to make sure that resident voices and local food leaders, all of those different stakeholder groups that we've touched on before, are represented in the planning process. So why is this important? Why not only invest in the local food system, but why plan for city agriculture or local food systems separately as a standalone plan rather than just, maybe including some language around this in your comprehensive plan? Really just a myriad of benefits. As you see here, we've grouped them into some categories that we like to focus on as we enter a planning process. But it just can really help to do a lot of things in your community. Building community connection, supporting local ecosystems and soil health, increasing access to healthy local food, and creating entrepreneurial opportunities to support the local economy. So a lot of these, of course, overlap and can be addressed by multiple recommendations that you might see in a plan. So to give an example of that, if you look at something like updating zoning to allow for on-site sales for gardens or farms, that creates a new and convenient point of sale for growers. It creates a really hyper-local place for residents in that neighborhood to access fresh and healthy food and brings them out to where their food is coming from, being grown, and just creating that connection as well. So those are kind of the broad overarching benefits of food systems planning, but we did also want to drill down and highlight the specific benefits of a city agriculture plan to your city. So the primary outcomes are first, a community food system assessment. So as part of our community engagement phase, Foodwell Alliance and ARC will also produce a community asset map highlighting all the local food and ag assets in the community that we can build on, a review of some secondary data related to agricultural activity and food access in the community to really give you a sense of kind of the baseline conditions, and an analysis of all of the community feedback that we gather through things like focus groups, surveys, interviews, to really determine the community priorities for planning. Of course, it also culminates in a city-approved plan. So ARC will produce a finalized and formatted plan for presentation to any relevant commissions that we need to speak to, and then City Council. And once that plan has been adopted, Foodwell Alliance awards a $75,000 implementation grant. That funding is pretty unrestricted. So we don't put simulations on which recommendations or programs within the plan it goes to. It's open to the city's prioritization and interpretation. And then a little bit less tangibly, but equally important, the process also yields increased community connectivity. So as we said, we like to bring folks out to events and just talk to as many people within the community as we can. Of course, engagement with city officials around local food systems, And then networking with other cities that are developing these plans. So thinking from a regional perspective as well. So with that, I want to turn it over to Emma to talk a little bit more about where we have planned before and kind of the context for this in the Metro Atlanta area.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so Sarah told us what a city agriculture plan is and what benefits it might have for your city. But you might be wondering where we've done this already. So in the Atlanta metro region, we piloted this program in East Point in 2019 and have since expanded to Alpharetta and are currently working in Jonesboro. But really thinking bigger than that, this is being done on a national scale with a lot of cities throughout the country planning intentionally for equitable and sustainable food systems. Since 2005, 18 states have developed state-level food system plans, and as of 2021, another 11 states had plans in development. Georgia, unfortunately, is not one of those states, so it's really important that more and more communities within Georgia are really demonstrating that this is a priority to help drive that potential state-level action. Additionally, there have been 550 regional and local food system plans across the country and over 320 active food policy councils. These are on the local, the regional, and the state levels. And they're coalitions of government, officials, nonprofits, and growers that really work together collectively for food and agricultural policy change. So by taking part in the city agriculture planning process, your city would really be helping lead the Metro Atlanta region in what is a growing national trend. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about East Point. So East Point was the first city to develop a city agriculture plan in the region. And when we look back to 2019, it is really incredible to see what has been done as a part of this work. So in partnership with Foodwell Alliance, East Point also received an additional USDA Regional Food System Partnership grant for $250,000 as a part of their implementation plan. As a part of that grant, we were able to hire a local farmer as an urban ag city manager to facilitate implementation programs like funding a farmer's market booth, fees for producers, funding market feasibility studies for a new potential grocery co-op and shared kitchen space, and incorporating food and ag programming into things like farm tours and cooking demonstrations for city wellness initiatives. And just this past month, East Point launched a community compost program through one of their partners, Compost Now. So I'm highlighting this because putting in the work up front to develop a city agriculture plan can also open up the doors for additional funding. USDA administers lots of grant programs, including this RFSP grant that East Point was able to get. And they all focus on expanding local access to food and supporting urban agriculture, including a formal plan and stronger partnerships and grant proposals. It really signifies a level of intentionality that you have structures in place to guide implementation, and this can really strengthen any potential applications. East Point was also able to form a local food ecosystem commission, and appoint a city body who are responsible for advising the mayor and the council on local food issues. And this was really key to East Point because now they can ensure that there is support for this program sustainably and that it outlasts any individual support from elected officials. And that really just strengthens this work in the long run. So we can turn and look at Alpharetta. And of course, every city looks different. So Alpharetta's implementation journey started this year, and it is really unique due to the city's deep commitment to advancing their local agriculture. They have a dedicated community agriculture staff within the Parks and Rec department who are really tasked with running ongoing programs, working on an active farm, and any city agriculture plan activity. They were already using city-owned land as growing spaces, both for community gardens and on a multi-acre educational farm, and they were really looking to expand those sites. So the city's agriculture plan program, or the city's community agriculture program, really laid the groundwork for resident engagement in a local food and agriculture initiative and led a lot of these recommendations, such as a cooperative of increasing numbers of home growers and a suite of educational programs to build gardening, food preservation, and general sustainability skills. So the recommendations and the outcomes from each plan are really tailored and specific to your city's needs and capacities and kind of what the residents in that area are really looking for. So now I can pass it back to Sarah to talk a little further about what these priority areas might look like and mean for your city.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So you'll notice we didn't include a slide on Jonesboro yet. Their plan is still in development and hopefully slated for approval this fall. But I did just want to take a minute to compare the overarching priority areas in these three plans. So these are kind of the section headlines, if you will, of each plan and how they're structured. Each of these would include multiple short-term and long-term recommendations in each to kind of advance these. But you'll see that there's some, clear similarities and distinctions. And as Emma mentioned, each city agriculture plan is really going to reflect the unique needs and priorities of the city that it's developed for. So at the bottom, we've also listed some key considerations to think about, what these priority areas could look like in a structure for your city. So first, you might want to think about your city's baseline. So what's going on in terms of city support for local food and agriculture currently? What is the other organizational or grower presence in the city? So who's already operating on the ground? What kind of work are they doing and how can we build on that? As Emma mentioned, Alpharetta has the community agriculture program that really set us up in a very impactful way to think about expanding city-owned growing spaces. Another key consideration is the needs of the community as it relates to food access. So when we started working in East Point, we learned that 91% of their residents live in USDA low-income, low-access designated tracts. So their ability to access fresh, healthy, and affordable food was significantly impacted, and that really drove improving local food access to the top of their priorities in their plan. And then lastly, what are the other economic and environmental goals of the city that can be connected to this work? As part of our community food system assessment, we do go through all of the other active plans the city has already developed. So the comprehensive plan, of course, but if there's anything around Parks and Rec, solid waste management, sustainability, really just thinking about building on what the city's already committed to in their other planning efforts and incorporating city agriculture planning into that. So hopefully you guys are all hooked now and are really interested in applying. So we want to get into the logistics of that. The application is detailed out on Foodwell Alliance's website, and I would encourage you all to go click around on there. If you haven't been already, not only does it have these application resources, but you can also find the full East Point City Agriculture Plan and Alpharetta City Plan as well, in case you just want to, see what this looks like in practice and see what the final result is of the full planning process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to talk a little bit more about the selection process and the timeline.
Yeah, thank you. Also, Sarah mentioned the application has 6 questions. So, and they're posted up here on the site. And I think what you will want to do as a city is think about your unique situation, how your city would benefit from the agricultural plan. Specific projects you have in mind that are already maybe underway but need another boost or need some additional planning resources. We could look at ordinances, zoning or ordinances that currently present barriers and how those might be removed. And that can also be done really well through this planning process. And what would make that city agricultural plan successful in your city specifically? Maybe you want to build up community that's already involved in some of the agricultural areas of your city. We've even done kind of a branding exercise where we took existing kind of food organizations in the city and made sure that people knew about them and spread the word about what was out there and kind of gave a kind of a location specific method to that. Also, what are some sustainable practices you might want to develop in your city? Is there a resiliency component? So some of those things are ways that you can look at your specific plans and how these would benefit your city. Another component is, has your city participated in the planning process with the Atlanta Regional Commission or other planning agency? This plan is a year-long plan, and it follows some of the similar trajectories of other planning, such as a comprehensive plan or maybe a CDAP. Also, it could be a town center plan. But what other planning has been done in the past? A lot of the elements as far as creating a project management team and a steering committee and the community engagement are similar. But we also, in addition to kind of having that experience of planning, can take other plans that are out there and coordinate these with the agricultural plan. So the past planning is a big part of that. Also, any other organizations that are involved, who's operating, who are potential stakeholders. This is really important to build upon to talk about what is already going on in your community. So whether it's farmers markets or actual farmers or community gardens, what do you already have that can be built upon? Also, city staff. Is city staff engaged? And is this a priority for the city to move forward? That's a really important element of this plan, because successful plans will have the engagement of city staff. And some plans, like Sarah mentioned, even take it a bit further and have a community organization set up that can recommend to city staff. So that bolsters the plan, because you have that community kind of oversight to give recommendations to the city, and then the engaged city to put those in place. And lastly, do you have any other initiatives or grants or funding that's already set up that can be expanded upon? So those are the 6 application questions and kind of some practical ways you can look at it for your city. And so the cities are selected after the application process closes by Foodwell Alliance and the ARC. And preference is going to be given to cities that have some of the following assets that are bulleted here. So like we mentioned, it's really important to have that city staff commitment. So that's one of the elements that we'll look at, because a lot of the planning and the agricultural initiatives can't be implemented if the city is not on board. It's a really important element of the process. We also need the community engaged. So we need enthusiastic residents. That's a really big element to getting this passed, is how engaged and how important the community feels about the agricultural planning. Prior experience, like we mentioned, also the diverse stakeholders, whether that's farmers, nonprofits, city residents, educators. So a diverse group of stakeholders that can all come together in this plan. And also multiple local food and agricultural organizations. So the more organizations that are already on the ground, the better it will be to kind of leverage what we come up with in the planning process. The thing that I think is so great about the agriculture plan is it's a full year timeline. So the applications open in September. I should say it's a year kind of on the ground with the planning. So the applications process opens in September, and then we are going through the Q&A process right now, and applications will close in November. They're evaluated in December, and there's a selection made for the city that will participate in the planning process in December. And from that time through the end of the year, we are in a very intense planning process with the city. It starts out with community engagement that Foodwell Alliance oversees. So that is, as Sarah mentioned, a lot of time out in the community, at tables. There are surveys, engaging in different ways with the community, and setting up the key stakeholders that will be part of the steering committee. That is from February to May. And then, February to May. And then in June, we launch into, I think we actually started in May this time, but May or June, we launch into the steering committee meetings. And we have 5 of those. So we have a fairly long and involved process with the steering committee, where we take the community engagement feedback and create priority buckets, which are kind of the big buckets, and then strategies within each. So when this plan is finished toward the end of the year, we actually have laid out the priorities and the steps to get this implemented. And I think that's a really important part of this, because the plan then can be handed over to the city and the stakeholders, and they understand exactly how everything will be prioritized and who is responsible and what steps need to be taken to implement it. So the agricultural plan is adopted. Toward the end of the year, we have December here, and then 75,000 of that implementation grant is awarded. And then the actual implementation begins. So that's when the community takes the plan and starts to implement those steps. And thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. So we are going to open it up to any questions that you guys might have now. If you have questions that are really specific to something that's happening in your city, it might be more helpful for us to have a one-on-one conversation about that. I will be following up with an email to everyone that registered and attended today. So if you want to reach out and schedule some time to chat about anything that goes really in depth into your city's particular operations, be happy to do that. But if you have questions more broadly about the process, community engagement, planning, implementation itself, we'd be happy to answer those now. So actually did want to launch one more quick poll before we start our questions, just to get a sense of maybe where those questions and continuing concerns are concentrated. So we want to hear, after this, do you feel better equipped to apply for the city agriculture plan? And then if you do have more questions, what would you like more information on? And this will just ensure that we can address those for y'all. So it looks like we have a lot of potential applicants, but maybe a majority of you still have questions about that process, and that is completely understandable. It's a pretty involved engagement and planning process, so we're happy to answer any questions that we can. Looks like questions are spread across the board from completing the application, community engagement, planning, and implementation. So thank you all for reflecting on that a little bit, and please feel free to drop those questions in the chat, and we will start running through. I am going to go ahead and just advance this. Here's our contact information. So if you have any follow-up questions, just as you reflect on the content from today, or maybe you reach out to other folks in your city, be that from the resident or organization side or the city official side that need to really be involved in this conversation to move it forward, we'd be happy to set up a call with them to share more information and answer anything that may be pressing for your city specifically. Applications are going to be open through November 17th. So we've still got about 6 weeks left. As you saw, the application is pretty brief, so plenty of time to give this some thought and complete that and get it in. But we would love to clarify anything that we can for y'all, either now or in follow-up. If you do want to schedule some time to reach out, or feel free to contact myself or Kristen or Emma at any time. And we hope to hear from y'all before mid-November when these applications are due. We'd really love to see applications coming in from a broad range of cities across our 5 counties. And with that, we'll just wrap up for today. So thank you all so much for attending, and we do hope to hear from you.